I spent 12 years in the Marine Corps. I've been shot at in Fallujah, seen things in the desert that would break most men. But nothing prepared me for what my unit encountered in the forests of Appalachia during a routine training exercise that was anything but routine. My name is Marcus Webb, Staff Sergeant, USMC, retired. What I'm about to tell you is documented in incident reports that will never see the light of day, witnessed by 19 men who signed NDAs so thick they could stop a bullet, and investigated by people whose job titles don't officially exist. It was October 2019, cold already in the mountains of West Virginia, the kind of cold that settles into your bones and doesn't leave until spring. Our unit, 2nd Battalion, 4th Marines, had been selected for what they called Advanced Wilderness Survival and Reconnaissance Training. Translation: they were testing new night vision equipment and wanted to see how we'd perform in dense forest terrain with minimal support. We deployed to a remote section of the Monongahela National Forest, and I mean remote. The kind of place where your GPS starts acting funny and your phone has been useless for the last 40 miles. Command had arranged for us to use an old ranger station as our base, a weathered log building that looked like it hadn't seen maintenance since the Cold War. The windows were dark with grime, and the porch sagged in the middle like a broken spine. Lieutenant Chen gathered us for briefing that first evening. The sun was already dropping behind the ridgeline, painting the valley in shades of copper and shadow. The trees, mostly oak and hickory mixed with dense pine, seemed to lean in as we stood in formation, our breath misting in the cooling air. "All right, listen up," Chen said, his voice cutting through the mountain silence. "We've got 6 days out here. Command wants us to run night ops, test the new nods, and complete a series of navigation exercises. This isn't a vacation. This terrain is unforgiving. Steep grades, old mining shafts, wildlife. Black bears are active this time of year, so secure your food. Stay alert, stay professional." Corporal Davis, standing next to me, muttered under his breath, "6 days in the middle of nowhere. Outstanding." I'd known Davis for 3 years. Good Marine, better friend. He had a wife and a baby girl back in North Carolina, and he showed anyone who'd sit still long enough an entire phone full of pictures. He was the kind of guy who made jokes when things got tense, who'd share his last cigarette even though he was trying to quit. That first night was routine. We set up our bivouac sites, 8 MREs that tasted like salted cardboard, and took turns on watch. The forest at night was alive with sound, the distant hoot of owls, the rustle of wind through dry leaves, the occasional crack of a branch. Normal sounds, comfortable even in their predictability. It was the second night when things started to feel wrong. I was on watch from 0200 to 400, paired with Private First Class Morrison, a quiet kid from Oregon who knew these forests better than most. We were positioned on the eastern perimeter of our camp, backs against a massive oak tree, our new night vision goggles turning the darkness into a grainy green world. "You ever get that feeling like you're being watched?" Morrison whispered around 0230. I lowered my NVGs and looked at him. His face was pale in the moonlight, jaw tight. "What are you picking up, Staff Sergeant?" "I don't know, Staff Sergeant. Something just feels off." I'd learned to trust that feeling over 12 years of service. The instinct that raises the hair on your neck, that tightens your gut. It's kept me alive more times than I can count. I scanned the tree line, letting my eyes adjust to the natural darkness. The moon was 3/4 full, bright enough to cast long shadows between the trees. That's when I heard it. A sound that didn't belong. Not an animal call. I've heard plenty of those. This was something else. A low, rhythmic, clicking sound, almost mechanical, echoing from somewhere deep in the forest to our east. Click, click, click. Pause. Click, click, click. Morrison heard it too. His hand tightened on his rifle. "What the hell is that?" "Could be a tree branch," I said, but I didn't believe it even as the words left my mouth. The sound was too regular, too purposeful. We sat in silence for the next 20 minutes, listening. The clicking would start, continue for maybe 15 or 20 repetitions, then stop for several minutes. Then it would start again, always from the same direction, never getting closer or farther away. At 03:45, it stopped completely. The sudden silence was somehow worse than the sound had been. I reported it to Lieutenant Chen during the morning briefing. He listened, made a note in his logbook, and said, "Probably just the forest settling. Temperature drops at night. Makes all kinds of weird noises." But I saw the way his eyes lingered on the tree line to the east, the way his hand absently touched his sidearm. That day, we ran navigation exercises through the dense forest. The terrain was brutal. Steep grades that left your legs burning, thick underbrush that grabbed at your gear, and everywhere the sense that the forest was somehow too quiet. Birds didn't sing, squirrels didn't chatter, even the wind seemed muted, as if the forest itself was holding its breath. Sergeant Kowalski, a big Polish guy from Chicago who could hump a full pack for 20 miles without breaking a sweat, pulled up beside me during a water break. His face was flushed with exertion, but his eyes were serious. "Hey, Staff Sergeant, you notice anything weird about the wildlife?" "Like what?" "Like there isn't any. I've been in these mountains before, with my dad. The place should be crawling with deer, turkey, squirrels. I haven't seen shit, not even tracks." He was right. Now that he mentioned it, the absence was glaring. No scat, no tracks, no game trails. Nothing. "Maybe we're just making too much noise," I suggested. Kowalski shook his head slowly. "Animals don't clear out of an entire valley because of a little noise. They clear out when there's a predator, a big one." The third night, Private Morrison went missing. He'd been on watch again, this time paired with Corporal Hicks on the southern perimeter. Hicks said Morrison had asked to take a piss around 0100, headed off into the trees, and never came back. We found his rifle propped against a tree 15 feet from their position. His NVGs were hanging from a low branch. His goddamn boots were placed neatly side by side next to a fallen log, laces still tied. But no Morrison. Lieutenant Chen immediately called for a full search. We spread out in a standard grid pattern, using flashlights and calling Morrison's name into the darkness. The forest swallowed our voices. Hours passed. Dawn came, gray and cold, with a mist that clung to the ground like something alive. We found the first sign of him around 0700 hours. Davis discovered it, a piece of Morrison's uniform torn and hanging from a briar bush maybe 200 yards from where he'd disappeared. The fabric was shredded, as if it had been pulled through the thorns at high speed. There was no blood, which somehow made it worse. "This doesn't make sense," Davis said, his voice tight. "Why would he run through the briars? What was he running from?" We continued searching, following a faint trail of broken branches and disturbed leaves that led deeper into the forest, up a steep ridge thick with pine. The air grew colder as we climbed, and the mist seemed to thicken rather than burn off. Lieutenant Chen was on the radio constantly, updating command, his voice growing strained with each report. At 0915, we found Morrison's dog tags hanging from a tree branch at eye level, swaying slightly in a breeze I couldn't feel. They'd been placed there deliberately. The chain was looped carefully over the branch, not snagged or torn. Beneath the tree, the ground was disturbed. Not footprints exactly, but something had pressed the earth down in a circular pattern, maybe 8 feet in diameter. The leaves and pine needles in that circle were blackened, as if exposed to intense heat, and they crumbled to ash when I touched them. "Staff Sergeant," Kowalski called from 20 feet away. His voice had gone flat, emotionless. The tone Marines use when they're looking at something so wrong their brain can't process it yet. He was standing at the base of a massive oak tree, staring upward.
I followed his gaze. Scratched into the bark, maybe 15 feet up, were symbols. Not random scratches, deliberate marks carved deep into the wood. They weren't letters from any alphabet I recognized, but they had a structure, a pattern. They looked old. The exposed wood darkened with age, but some of the marks looked fresh, the wood still pale and weeping sap. "How the hell did someone get up there to carve those?" Davis asked. No one had an answer. We continued searching until 1400 hours when Lieutenant Chen made the call to return to base and wait for reinforcements. We were exhausted, rattled, and no closer to finding Morrison. The hike back was silent except for the crunch of our boots on dead leaves and the occasional crackle of radio traffic. That's when Corporal Hicks, who'd been walking rear guard, suddenly stopped and said, in a voice barely above a whisper, "We're being followed." We all froze. I slowly turned, bringing my rifle up, scanning the forest behind us. The mist had grown thicker, reducing visibility to maybe 30 yards. For a long moment there was nothing but the sound of our breathing and the faint drip of condensation from the trees. Then I saw it. Movement in the mist, maybe 40 yards back. Something tall, very tall, moving between the trees with a fluid, deliberate gait that wasn't quite human. It was hard to make out details through the fog, but I got an impression of long limbs, of something angular and wrong. It stopped when I looked directly at it, becoming perfectly still, and I felt with absolute certainty that it was staring back at us. "Contact," Chen said quietly, his voice controlled but urgent. "Tactical formation, we move back to base. Steady pace, weapons ready. Do not fire unless I give the command." We began moving, keeping formation, every man's head on a swivel. The thing in the mist paralleled us, staying just at the edge of visibility. Sometimes it was there, sometimes it seemed to vanish entirely, only to reappear minutes later from a different angle. It never came closer, but it never fell behind either. The 20-minute hike back to base took 45 minutes. By the time we reached the ranger station, we were all drenched in cold sweat, despite the temperature. Lieutenant Chen was on the radio immediately, requesting immediate extraction and backup. The voice on the other end was calm, professional, and absolutely certain extraction wouldn't be possible until the weather cleared. A storm system was moving in, grounding all helicopters. Earliest extraction was 36 hours out. "Then send ground support," Lieutenant Chen argued, his composure finally cracking. "Negative. Nearest unit is 8 hours away minimum. You're equipped and trained for this, Lieutenant. Secure your position and wait for extraction."
Chen looked at the 19 men standing around him, all of us watching, and I saw something in his face I'd never seen before. Fear. But he squared his shoulders and said, "Understood. Webb, Kowalski, get everyone inside. We're fortifying this position." The ranger station was not designed for military occupation. It had 4 rooms, a main common area, 2 small offices, and a storage room, with windows on all sides and 2 doors. We blocked the windows with whatever furniture we could move, set up overlapping fields of fire, and established a perimeter watch rotation. No one was going outside alone. Period. Night fell like a hammer. The clicking started at 2100 hours, loud this time, close, coming from multiple directions. Click, click, click from the east, answering clicks from the west, then the north, surrounding us. "They're communicating," Morrison had said. No, that was wrong. Morrison was gone. It was Davis who said it, his face pressed against a gap in the covered windows. "Whatever they are, they're talking to each other." At 22:30, something hit the roof. Not a branch. The impact was too solid, too heavy. We heard footsteps up there, slow and deliberate, crossing from one end of the building to the other.
Then silence. Then the footsteps again, faster this time. Then something that sounded like claws or nails scraping across the old shingles, a sound that set every tooth on edge. "Suppress fire?" Sergeant Kowalski asked, his finger on the trigger guard. "Negative," Chen said. "We don't know what's up there. Could be Morrison, disoriented, trying to get our attention." We all knew that was bullshit, but orders were orders. At midnight, the power went out. We'd been using the station's generator for light, and it died with a mechanical wheeze that sounded almost organic. Our flashlights and the moonlight through gaps in our window coverings became our only illumination. And then we heard the voice. "Help me!" Faint, coming from outside the eastern wall. "Please help me! I'm hurt!" It was Morrison's voice. Perfect. Every inflection, every tone. "Morrison?" Davis called out. "That you, man?" "Davis, it hurts. Please, I can't move. I need help." Davis started toward the door. I caught his arm. "Wait." "That's Morrison, Staff Sergeant. He's hurt. We have to—" "Listen to it," I said. "Really listen." We stood in silence. Morrison's voice called out again. "Please, it's so cold. I'm bleeding. Davis, please." And then I heard it. The thing that had triggered my subconscious alarm. Between the words, almost hidden, there was a sound, that same rhythmic clicking, low and quiet, underlying Morrison's voice like a backing track. And the voice, perfect as it was, didn't breathe. The sentences ran together without pause for air. "That's not Morrison," I said. Davis's face went white. Lieutenant Chen moved to the window, peering through a gap. In the moonlight, we could see a figure standing at the tree line. Tall, unnaturally so, with proportions that looked almost right, but weren't. Arms too long, legs with too many joints. "Help me," it said in Morrison's voice. "Why won't you help me?" Chen stepped back from the window. "No one goes outside. No one responds. That is a direct order." The thing wearing Morrison's voice stayed there for 2 hours, calling to us, begging, pleading, sometimes screaming. It knew details. Morrison's wife's name, his daughter's birthday, stories from his childhood, information it shouldn't have. The psychological pressure was immense. Several times I saw Marines reach for the door, caught between training and the human instinct to help a brother in arms. At 0200, it gave up. The voice stopped mid-sentence, and when Chen risked another look, the figure was gone. The clicking started again, immediately, louder now, coming from all sides, and then the roof began to shake. Not wind. This was impact after impact, like multiple heavy bodies landing and taking off. The old building groaned under the stress, dust sifting down from the ceiling boards. "They're testing our defenses," Kowalski said, "seeing how we react." He was right. This was hunting behavior, pack tactics. They were intelligent. At 3:30 a.m., the real attack began. Something hit the eastern door with enough force to crack the frame. Wood splintered. The makeshift barricade we'd built held, but barely. A second impact, and I heard the sound of claws digging into wood, long, scraping sounds that set my teeth on edge. "Defensive positions," Chen ordered. "Hold fire until you have a clear target." A window shattered on the western wall. Something reached through. I saw it in flashlight beam, a limb that was too long, too angular, covered in something that looked like bark, but moved like skin. It swept across the room, knocking over furniture, the fingers, if they were fingers, ending in points that scraped across the floor. Corporal Hicks fired. The muzzle flash lit up the room like lightning. The thing withdrew with a shriek that wasn't quite animal and wasn't quite human. A sound that made something primal in my brain scream to run, to hide, to get away at any cost. "Covering fire, western wall," Chen shouted. We opened up, controlled bursts, the room filling with thunder and the acrid smell of cordite. Something screamed outside, multiple somethings. For a moment, I thought we'd driven them off. Then the roof caved in. Not completely, just a section, in the northwestern corner. Old boards and shingles crashing down along with something else. Something that landed in a crouch and rose to its full height in the corner of the room. And for the first time, we saw one clearly.
It was tall, 7, maybe 8 feet, with a body that seemed to shift between forms in the unstable light. Sometimes it looked almost human, a skeletal figure in ragged darkness. Then the light would change, and I'd see something else. Too many joints, limbs that bent wrong, a head that was too narrow and too long. Its eyes reflected our flashlights like an animal's, but the intelligence behind them was unmistakable. It opened its mouth, too wide, hinged like a snake's, and spoke in Morrison's voice. "Why won't you help me?" X fired. The rounds hit center mass. I saw the impacts, but the thing just flinched and moved. Fast. Faster than anything that size should move. It crossed the room in 2 strides and grabbed Private Martinez, lifting him off his feet. The screaming started. I've been in combat. I've heard men die. But the sound Martinez made as that thing carried him back toward the hole in the roof, it wasn't human. It was the sound of someone whose mind has shattered completely, reduced to pure animal terror. Kowalski and I both fired, full auto, discipline forgotten. The thing shrieked that horrible sound again and dropped Martinez. It went up through the hole faster than seemed possible, and Martinez hit the floor hard. He was breathing, conscious, but his eyes were wrong. Empty, staring at nothing. "Medvac!" Jen was shouting. "I need a medvac now! We have casualties and we are under attack!" The voice on the radio was maddeningly calm. "Confirm nature of attack. Over." "Unknown hostiles. Multiple contacts. They're—" He paused and I saw him struggle with what to say. "How do you report this?" "They're not human. We need immediate extraction." "Say again, Lieutenant? You're breaking up." But we all heard it clearly. They didn't believe him. Or worse, they didn't want to. The rest of that night was a siege. They, whatever they were, attacked in waves, testing us, learning. They never came through the same breach twice. They throw things at the building, rocks, branches, once what looked like a deer carcass that hit the western wall with a wet thud. Between attacks, the clicking would start, that rhythmic conversation in a language we couldn't understand. Dawn came slowly, gray light seeping through our covered windows like dirty water. The attacks stopped. The clicking faded. By 0700, the forest was silent again. We'd lost 2 men. Martinez hadn't spoken since his encounter. He sat against the wall, rocking slowly, his eyes tracking things none of us could see. And at 5:43, Private Hudson had cracked. He'd opened the east end door and run screaming into the forest before anyone could stop him. We heard him for maybe 30 seconds, his voice getting farther away. Then nothing. At 1100 hours, 3 Blackhawks came in low and fast, combat loaded, escorted by an Apache gunship. The extraction was military efficient. We were in the air in under 8 minutes. I never saw the ranger station again, but as we climbed and banked west, I looked down at the forest. The trees were moving, not from wind, purposefully. Things moving through them, dozens of them converging on where we'd been. And in a clearing maybe half a mile from the station, I saw Morrison, or what was left of him. He was strung up between two trees, his body positioned in a way that suggested it had been on display. Arranged. They'd left him there as a message. We never talked about it officially. The incident report listed Morrison and Hudson as training casualties due to environmental factors. Martinez was medically discharged 3 months later. Never spoke again. The rest of us were reassigned to different units within the Corps within a week. But 2 years later, I got a call. Private number. A voice I didn't recognize, asking if I'd be willing to consult on unusual field encounters. Government work, they said. Specialized division. Good pay. They sent me files. Incident reports from military units around the world. The pattern was always the same. Remote areas. Missing personnel. Sounds in the darkness. And those symbols carved in trees or scratched into rock. The same ones we'd seen in West Virginia. I turned down the job. Some things you walk away from. But sometimes, late at night, I still hear it. That clicking sound, rhythmic and patient, coming from somewhere just beyond the edge of consciousness. And I wonder if they're still out there in those mountains, waiting in the spaces between the trees, speaking their alien language, hunting. I wonder if Morrison's voice is still calling out in the darkness, asking for help. And I wonder how many others have heard it. How many answered?